For over 150 years, the Republican Party has been home to some of our nation's greatest leaders and to its most enduring ideas.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We are not enemies, but friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The principles upon which our party stands have always endured and persevered. From our beginning, ours has been the party of the union, of holding a fractured country together as one indivisible nation. Our party stands for the rule of law. We are pledged to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We support the peaceful transfer of power. Our party once stood for fiscal responsibility. We renew our historical commitment to a sound economy. Our party stands for free enterprise. We support the private sector as the source of prosperity against big government interventions. And our party stands for peace through strength. We believe that a peaceful world depends on a strong America that is steadfast in opposing aggression of Russia and other hostile regimes. Join us at our Republican legacy.
Well, a lot of what we're going to do is on video today, so I want to pause to make sure, Matthew, will all the other videos play correctly now, or?
Yep,
Sure. You're sure?
as sure as I can be.
Should we play that again? You already see it? Sorry about that. Thank you all for being here. My name is Chris Vance. I am the chairman of our Republican Legacy in Washington State. I am one of our 5 senior advisors, sort of our managing senior advisor, and privilege of being your MC today. Before we go any further, we have a video opening remarks from our founder and president, Senator John Danforth.
1 second. Okay, here we go.
Oh, all that's coming up. Today, we had a great victory in this country for the Constitution, for our movement. The United States Supreme Court struck down the president's ability to unilaterally declare and impose tariffs via emergency. This is one of the things that we do with our Republican Legacy is we put out position papers. The very first one we published was on tariffs, and our founder, Senator Danforth, was one of the people who filed a brief in court on this. So we've been very outspoken about this and are thrilled to see that the court has upheld the guardrails of the Constitution and now call on Republicans in Congress and elsewhere to return this country to a pro-growth free trade policy. And Senator Danforth has been one of the major leaders on it. And Matt has the finger up saying the video is going to play soon.
It's going to play soon. Hold on. We're having a small issue that I am fixing. Okay. So.
Thanks so much for attending this 3rd National Committee meeting of our Republican Legacy. During this meeting, you will be discussing and planning for the future for the 2026 campaign and beyond, and what we can do to improve the state of American politics. You know, a couple of years ago, when I first started talking to people about our Republican legacy, a lot of traditional Republicans had just given up. They thought, well, there's no hope. We've all been overtaken by Trump. That is the Republican Party. And I think that things have really changed in the last year, and in a way changed in our favor, although certainly not in the favor of the United States in general. Because what's happened in the second Trump term is that this administration has so overplayed its hand and so been at odds with where the American people are, both politically and where they are in their souls. I mean, politically, where the American people are is somewhere in the political center. Public opinion polls show this repeatedly. A lot of people nowadays, when they go to the polls, they're picking between two unattractive alternatives, and they'd rather vote for none of the above. The center is where the American people are. And the role of the Republican Party traditionally has been in the center. It's been the conservative part of the center of American politics, the responsible center, responsible conservatism. And it just isn't that anymore. It isn't conservative, that's for sure. I mean, huge, uncontrolled federal spending, big deficits, explosion of the national debt, government intervention in the private sector, high tariffs, price controls, government ownership of businesses, and then beyond the business world, whatever you think about what's going on in universities these days, do we really want the federal government to be in charge of the admissions policies of private universities, or who law firms should represent or could represent? None of this is conservative. It's really quite radical. And our role in our Republican legacy is to regain the center and regain the responsible conservative approach that the Republican Party has taken. So the second Trump administration has overplayed its hand. It's not where the American people are politically. And it's also not where the American people are in their hearts. I mean, the basic approach now in politics is to make people angry, to appeal to rage, resentment, feeling that we're being had, that they are against us. And this has been the message of the right wing of the Republican Party, kind of a conspiracy theory that we have been had. I mean, somehow we're being told that, and this is kind of hard for me to believe, that white male Christians are being abused and being taken advantage of. So rage and stirring up rage has been the basic tactic of the new Republican Party, the MAGA version of the party. But the American people essentially are not angry people. They're good people. And our role should be to appeal to that goodness. And in the last year, the appeal to rage has now evolved into something even worse, uglier. That is meanness, cruelty even. So the masked people in Minneapolis have now become the face of the Republican Party. And that can't be. That's not what our party was. You know, the first president that we had, Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, you know how he spent his evenings when he was president? He spent his evenings reviewing the sentences of soldiers who had been convicted of crimes, desertion, even striking officers, and they'd been sentenced to death. And that's what Lincoln reviewed, and he pardoned thousands of kids because he thought these were kids. But there was one group of people who Lincoln would not pardon, and those were people who were mean, who were cruel. Lincoln would not pardon cruelty, the first president of our party. And we shouldn't pardon it either. We should stand against it. We should try to evoke the better angels, another one of his terms, the better angels of the American people, not the very worst in our people. So our Republican legacy has a job to do, to restore what the Republican Party has been historically, a responsible conservative party, and to restore a sense that the American people are essentially good, and our job should be to appeal to that goodness. We have a lot of work to do. We have a long way to go, but I am absolutely confident that we're on the right side of this. I am absolutely confident that our day will come.
Senator Danforth, along with Senator William Cohen, Senator Alan Simpson, founded our Republican legacy in the spring of 2024 to be an organization to give voice to traditional Republican core values. After the election, there was a bit of a pause as we thought to consider what comes next and what should we do and how do we move this party forward. And then there was real determination to grow ORL into a new phase, to not just messaging, but also mobilization. We basically, I don't think Senator Danforth likes this term, but we basically relaunched ORL in April of 2025. So we've been active for less than a year. We've been able to accomplish in that time is really remarkable. We have 25 state chairs. Many of them are here today, others on Zoom. Our list is now, or what we call our national committee, up near 10,000 names. And this is our third national committee meeting. And we are determined to continue to grow. And I now want to introduce some of our leadership and our staff who are here, just around the room. Anna Allred back there, our outstanding intern from William and Mary. Over here, Matt Lund, our communications consultant and technology person. He's having fun today, solving the various tech problems in the hotel. Joe San Giorgio just walked in, our media consultant. Senator Michael Steele will be introduced later. J.D. White over here is the Secretary Treasurer of the organization, a key officer. And I want each of our state chairs who are here to introduce themselves. So Anna, you're going to be the microphone person. And then we have a few more on Zoom. So folks, brief introductions, please.
My name's Nate Bill, former Arkansas legislator. If you Google Nate Bill, that's 2 4-letter words, you'll see more 4-letter words. I like to say that I try to emulate John Lewis in Good Trouble, and I think you can best sum my life these days up with a quote from Lewis Chatton. Tonight, to my Republican friends who are defending the indefensible, the day will come when Donald Trump will be gone, or your dishonor will remain.
I am Andy Eastpond. I'm from Riverwoods, Illinois, which is a suburb north of Chicago. And I was really attracted to our Republican legacy because I respect John Danforth's legacy as sort of a unifying force in our country. I read both of his books, and I think, in the era of post-Trumpism, I think a kinder, gentler approach that sounds more like Bush 41, but Danforth embodies that as well. I think that's going to come back and vote again, and it's just going to be a question of who the new generation will be that will embody them.
My name is Greg Wilson. I'm originally from Ohio and now serve as Florida State Chair, at least temporarily, and a senior advisor, and I do a lot of work on policy development. And I want to thank you all for being here on what I'm labeling Reverse Liberation Day. Our very first, as Chris said, policy statement was on tariffs, and the Supreme Court basically upheld our policy position. So if you haven't had a chance to look at some of those on the website, I invite you to do so.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Chuck Brown from Michigan. I was in 2000 till 2016, a year which would live in infamy. I was an election day volunteer for the Michigan Republican Party and the Republican National Waves Association.
I'm Merrill Matthews. I'm the Texas State Chair. I am a columnist for the Hill, a weekly columnist. There's 3 of us, 2 liberals, Warren Williams and Bill Press, and I'm the conservative. Before that, I was a philosophy professor, spent 35 years in the free market think tank world. And part of that time, I ran an organization here in Washington called the Council for Affordable Health Insurance for about 9 years. And was the former chair of the Texas Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I was on that commission for about 17 years, but we got term limited out. So we finished our last paper that I was chair of in September.
I'm Linda Desai. I'm the Virginia State Chair from Williamsburg, and my background, I was a Hill staffer, chief of staff for Republican congressman back in the 1970s and 80s, and was a Reagan appointee at USDA, and I found our Republican legacy when I heard Michael Steele on a podcast with Charlie Sykes, and looked further into it and decided this was where I belonged.
Okay, now, number of state chairs on Zoom. Can we get to them, Matthew? Oh, there you go.
They just need to unmute.
Gary, unmute and please introduce yourself.
Well, I guess I'm unmuted now. I'm Gary Sass. I'm the chair of the Rhode Island Group. Previously served as state director of administration and revenue. In 2016, I was a co-chair of the Kasich campaign and a Northeast policy advisor to that campaign, and have headed the public leadership program at Bryant University for a number of years. We've been pretty active in Rhode Island. There was an unannounced fight for the chairmanship of the party, and at the last minute, we entered it not overtly as our Republican legacy, but just as good government Republicans. And we really set the table for 2026. We lost, but the vote was 85-74, which no one anticipated that there was that much ground support. And we're in the process now of organizing a group, which we're going to call the Republican Problem Solvers Caucus, which is going to deal with state issues. Because what we're finding is that we do better speaking to people here about good government republicanism when we identify with local issues.
Great, thank you, Gary. And Gary is really, no offense to my other state chairs, been our superstar state chair. If you just heard him, they organized a candidate from our wing of the party to run for state chair of the Republican Party in Rhode Island and nearly won. That's exactly what we need to be working on as an organization. So, Matt, who else looking for other state chairs on Zoom?
You got Michael?
Michael who?
Oh, Broadcorp.
Michael Broadcorp. I don't see you, but
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Minnesota.
I am Michael Broadcorp. I'm the former deputy chair of the Republican Party of Minnesota. Great to be here on the front lines in Minnesota, where we've been dealing with a lot of overreach and a lot of issues. I'm a former state chair of the co-chair of the Republicans for Harris and Walls here in Minnesota, but I really identified with what Senator Danforth said about the good fight and appealing to our better angels. We've been having to do that in Minnesota. I'm great to be there in spirits, but here in Minnesota, fighting the good fight. Thank you all.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Michael's a good example of a lot of our state chairs are veteran Republican operatives. He's the former deputy chairman of the state party and making a difference out there in Minnesota. I believe now we have our California state chair, Steve Willing.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Willing from Encinitas, California, near San Diego. I'm a retired business guy. I ran several manufacturing companies. Stayed out of politics for the most part during my career. Now that I'm retired, I wanted to get involved. So I'm new to this whole thing. I can use any support, advice, or recommendations. I'll be glad to have any help that my other state chairs can give me. Believe in the cause and want to see us get back to having a civil discussion. You can't collaborate and work together if you're throwing mud at each other. And we need to get back to being a country that we respect each other and we listen and we go get things done. Thanks.
And I believe we have RJ Lyman, our state chair in Massachusetts. RJ, I thought you were today.
I am going to be there later today. I apologize. I'm your Massachusetts state chair, a longtime aide to former Governor Weld, and newly installed as the president of the Niskanen Center here in D.C. So I've got to finish one more meeting this afternoon, and I'll come down and see you all this afternoon and for this evening.
Thank you, RJ. Matt, no more state chairs lined up on Zoom. So as I said, we have 25 state chairs around the country, all doing great work. We need more. Anyone here in the room or out there on Zoom, if you are interested in being a state chairman, you can go on our webpage and see if we have someone for your state. Even if we do, I don't think any of our state chairs would turn down a co-chair, a vice chair, some helpers. So if you'd like to help as a state chair, please get a hold of us. So Matt, is the next video almost ready to go? Okay.
Almost ready.
So we're now going to talk briefly about who we are. What is our Republican legacy all about? Most of us are here this weekend in conjunction with the Principals First Summit. We will be here all weekend. We'll have a table across the street at the Gaylord Center. It's a big meeting of, it's like center-right Woodstock, right? It's a big meeting of our community. And we are a community of principled conservatives who are dissatisfied, to put it mildly, with the current direction of the Republican Party and this country. But we're not all of the same mind. Some of people in our community have, or maybe always were, independents. Others, some of my best friends, have given up on the Republican Party and are now running for office as Democrats. I understand that. We respect that. But ORL represents the slice of our community that is determined to remain Republican and to remain in the Republican Party and to fight for the future of the Republican Party. And that's what we're doing. We think of ourselves as the Republican National Committee in exile, or the resistance. We're like a few brave resistance fighters in the woods with a couple of pistols and hand grenades, just waiting for Normandy, because Normandy's coming in 2028. So to illustrate that, we have hopefully a video. Yes, good to go. Video that lays out our mission statement and what we're working on.
On October 8, 1961, 22 Republican activists met in Chicago to launch a movement to turn the Republican Party in a more conservative direction. Their explicit goal was to elect a majority of the delegates to the 1964 National Convention. But they all knew that the ultimate objective was to nominate and elect Barry Goldwater. They knew that the direction of an American political party is determined by the fight for the presidential nomination. On April 14, 2024, former Senators John Danforth, Alan Simpson, and William Cohen, with 34 other distinguished Republican leaders, announced the launch of another new movement, Our Republican Legacy, to return the Republican Party to those fundamental principles that historically defined us. Those principles are the Union, the unity of America as one nation, not a collective of warring factions, the Constitution, the legitimacy of elections and the authority of Congress and the courts, fiscal responsibility, concern for our national debt, free enterprise, markets free of excessive governmental control, including high protective tariffs and price controls, and peace through strength. Danforth, Simpson, and Cohen said that ORL would, quote, provide the resistance, unquote, to the MAGA direction of the party and would facilitate a comeback of traditional republicanism. The pivotal 2028 election, which will determine the post-Trump direction of our party, looms on the horizon. Therefore, we offer this mission statement to make our objective crystal clear. The mission of our Republican legacy is to restore the Republican Party to its historic positions by building a national movement to elect Republicans, those who support our fundamental principles, to public and party offices, and most importantly, to help nominate and elect a legacy Republican president in 2028 to address the critical public policy issues facing our great nation. Consistent with our status as a 501c4 advocacy organization, we will achieve these objectives via public messaging and by mobilizing legacy Republicans nationwide.
1 year from today, roughly 1 year from today, people in both parties are going to begin lining up and announcing the president. Think about that. The 2028 election is just over the horizon. And we want to be a part of determining that future. So our Republican legacy is working in two ways. The first is in terms of messaging. of constantly delivering the message around our 5 core principles through meetings like today, social media, free media, and the graphic of the
Sorry, my hair.
Joe's graphic. And then the call to action graphic. Okay. So I'm not quite sure how well you can see that, but this is a slide that shows all the various media hits we've had just since October. All the various places where our messengers, our chairs, and again, we now have 5 national chairs: Senator Danforth, Senator Cohen, Senator Simpwell, and former Congressman Charlie Dent, former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, and then a number of senior advisors who are great messengers. Oh, and I'm sorry, Governor Mark Roscoe, former chairman of the Republican National Committee. And they are all often out there on podcasts and the media delivering our message. We estimate that the value of the earned media we've generated just since October of last year is $1.6 billion. So we are always out there delivering our message. We have a daily message on social media. Messaging is very important. But the other thing, now call to action, is mobilization. Messaging is great. Speeches are great. Interviews are great. But we also want to work on building a grassroots organization. So this is my first call to action. For those of you in the room, those of you watching, here is how you can help us mobilize. Sign up to join our national committee on our website, Our Republican Links. Follow, share, like our content every day. It's the cheapest, easiest thing you can do for any organization you support. Go to the things they are posting and like them and share them. Do that all the time. Sign up to be a monthly contributor. We are not a political action committee. We are not attempting to raise billions and millions of dollars, but it's not free. And we need to keep raising money. So if you believe in what we're doing, sign up to be a donor. Volunteer to be a state chair. I'm going to say this again. We have 25 state chairs. We need 25 more. I can't think of a single one of our chairs who doesn't need help, would not welcome a vice chair or co-chair. So if you're interested in serving as a state chair, and we don't ask for tons of time, just for you to mobilize, to amplify our message and help with mobilization, sign up and join. And finally, and this is important, sign up to be a Republican precinct committee leader. So it is not likely that we, as an organization, are going to be involved in races in 2026. It's not what we do. We're not a PAC. We're focused on the presidential campaign in 2028. But leading to that, we are focused on helping elect like-minded Republicans to party offices. We are asking our supporters at the grassroots level, we do this constantly with email and texting and phone calls, to sign up to run for precinct committee officer or delegate, whatever we call it in each individual state. In my state, Washington State, you sign up in May to run for precinct committee officer in the August primary. If you are elected, and the vast majority of those races are uncontested, you then are an automatic delegate to the county convention, which makes it easy for you to get to the state convention. So you can influence the platform, you can influence who gets the nomination. You can have all sorts of impacts. And that's when people talk about taking back the party, that's how you do it. I was former state party chairman. I was from the Reaganite wing of the party. We were constantly having to do battle. Michael can agree with this, right? With the Ron Paul libertarian wing of the party that was doing. I can't keep it still. If I do, I have to, no, I can't do that. I'll try. The tech setup here is not the best. you have to fight back against the folks who, like, as I said, the Ron Paul people or the others who wanted to take control of your party. Well, now we're on the outside, and we need to come back and do that. Later this year, we're exploring the possibility of having our Republican legacy candidates run for state party chairman. And maybe you might see an ORL candidate for RNC chairman. We'll see. That's ambitious, but we shall see. So if that's what we're going to ask folks to do, and all of you can help with that. Okay. Next, to talk about 2026 and going into 2028, we're thrilled today to have one of the smartest people in the party, Whit Ayers, with North Star Polling, North Star Opinion Research. He's going to do a presentation on where the world stands today and where it might be headed in 2028. So, Whit.
Turn the other one off, give him that one.
Hello, one, two. Folks up here may want to sit in the front row because we're going to be showing a lot of data, and it will be a lot easier to view that if you see a picture of what I'm talking about. Chris, it's good to be with you. Appreciate the invitation. Be with you again. As he said, I'm Whit Ayers with North Star Opinion Research. For the last 35 years, we have helped elect sane Republican candidates. And it has been a real pleasure. I've met some really, really interesting people. Worked for Carol Campbell in South Carolina, a new South Republican governor. Worked with Bill Haslam, a very, very fine governor of Tennessee. He left 8 years with 73% job approval, which is almost unheard of in this day and age. Worked with a whole host of senators. Paul Coverdale was my first one, a very fine senator from Georgia. With also Bill Frist, when he first ran, upset race in 1994, became majority leader of the U.S. Senate. Bar Alexander, Bob Corker, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham in the pre-Trump era, John Kennedy, a whole host of really, really interesting, good people. And it's been a pleasure to help them get elected, and I'd like to see more of them get elected in the future. I discovered my task here today is to talk about the Trump presidency and where we go from here. I've discovered that it's very difficult to talk about Donald Trump without pissing somebody off. People feel so intensely strong about this man, both for and against, that it's very difficult to talk without antagonizing somebody. My goal here, and the only way I know how to do it, is to root what I have to say in data, merely public opinion data, and just present it as straight as I can, good, bad, indifferent. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. I'm going to show you a number of slides here. An expanded version of this presentation is on our website, northstaropinion.com, which may be easier for you to see rather than try to see it on the screen. So Matt, let's go. So how's Trump doing 1 year into his second term? Well, Donald Trump started his second term with the lowest job approval of any president in the history of polling in the last 64 years, with only one exception. Donald Trump in his first term. So he's not exactly starting with the kind of position that most American presidents have started with. Matt, let's go. His job approval has steadily declined in the second term. He is currently at his lowest point, down around 40.5% as of this morning in this silver bulletin. So it's clear that he's on a downward trend. He has lost 1/3 of his support among independents. He never had any support among Democrats. The support among Republicans has held up fairly well. Still 86% of Republicans approve of the job he's doing. But it's pretty concerning when you lose 1/3 of your support among independents. This includes a lot of the groups that switched from Biden to Trump. That would be young people, African Americans, Hispanics. And so that's where he really has slipped, which is part of the reason, main reason, why his overall job approval has gone from it was above 50 for a couple of weeks, but down to 40% now. A majority of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of immigration, the economy, trade, and especially inflation. 3 of those 4, immigration, the economy, and inflation, were 3 of the 4 reasons he was elected, or re-elected in 2024. The 4th one was the cultural issue, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Let's go back, Matt. If we can look at that again. The inflation one has to be most concerning to the administration, where only 34% of Americans approve of what he's doing on inflation, which is why he's talking about affordability so much, because this is a real problem for the administration, because so many people believe, and they were basically right, that the pre-pandemic Trump economy was better than the Biden economy. And so they voted for him to bring back the pre-pandemic Trump economy, but at least based on data we've seen so far, people aren't real satisfied. Okay, Matt, let's go. Based on the experience of the last 25 years, deporting most of the 14 million illegal immigrants in the country is impossible. These are deportations by president, and you'll see that the #1 deporter in chief was Barack Obama. He maxed out at about 400,000 deportations a year, a level that Trump has yet to meet. They talk about doing 500,000 a year. They're not even close to that now. But let's just assume that Trump is successfully deporting 500,000 illegal immigrants a year. Let's see. Let's do a little elementary math. 14 million divided by 500,000 is 28 years to deport all the illegal immigrants in the country. It's obviously not going to happen. So a rational government, a rational country would take a look at these data and say, we need to figure out how we're going to handle those people who are going to be here and are not going to leave. The 2013 immigration reform bill that Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham clients worked on would have addressed a lot of these issues. It was $30 billion for border security, $30 billion in that bill. It got 68 votes in the Senate. John Boehner wouldn't put it on the floor. And an argument with his top person ongoing, he says it wouldn't have passed. Well, put it on the floor and find out. That would have solved a lot of the problems that we're facing today. But 12 years ago, there was an opportunity and it frittered away, and now we're dealing with major league immigration issues. This is deliberately a chart from a year ago. I want to point out that the reaction to the immigration enforcement is nothing that wasn't predicted. This is American support for reporting illegal immigrants who committed crimes. 89% say, yeah, go after them. The worst of the worst, the way they talk about it. Have been accused of committing nonviolent crimes like shoplifting. 62%. Get them out of here. Have lived in the U.S. for less than 5 years, 55%. This is a reaction to the feeling that in the Biden administration, the border was basically open. And we need to get rid of those people who came across. We keep going down the list. Have not broken any laws in the U.S. except for immigration laws. 57% of Americans oppose deporting those people. I've lived in the U.S. for more than 10 years. 67% oppose. Our parents of children who are U.S. citizens by birth, 66% oppose. And arrive in the U.S. as children, DACA kids, 70% oppose deporting them. What the administration is doing with rounding up people indiscriminately is opposed by the overwhelming majority of Americans. It should not be a surprise that you're getting pushback on what they're doing. Okay, let's keep going here. This is another thing that's really troubling. This is the outbreak of measles in South Carolina, primarily in the upstate around Spartanburg. A top official in the CDC a couple of weeks ago said he just dismissed it. The outbreak of deadly preventable diseases like measles is the cost of doing business in a global economy with international travel. Well, you know what the #1 employer is in Spartanburg, South Carolina? The German-owned BMW plant. Don't you think that maybe they've had a lot of international travel and global business in 2025 and before? These are 2026 numbers. And it's all a function of vaccine skepticism that's been promoted by the top public health official in the country, who last week told the world that he had been snorting cocaine off of a toilet seat. This is a kind of judgment your top public health official is promoting. And this is the result. And this is deadly stuff. We thought we had killed measles in this country until we started this vaccine skepticism. And that's the result. And kids are going to die. Okay? Defining the Trump presidency. Let's go to the next one. Picking up on what Senator Danforth said. Donald Trump is not a conservative by any historical understanding of the term, a reverence for traditional institutions, limited government, free markets, all the things that Senator Danforth was saying. It's a populism. What's a populism? Well, you're fighting for the common people against the corrupt elites. So, Matt, let's go. What does this mean? Populist politicians around the world are essentially anti. They're anti-immigrant, deportable, anti-expertise. Don't pay any attention to scientists who tell you that the COVID vaccine will keep you from getting COVID. Do your own research. You may not have ever taken a course in biology, but do your own research. Anti-media, enemy of the people, anti-establishment. People who aren't on board are RINOs, Republicans in name only. There may even be a few in this room. Anti-intellectual. Let's go after the universities. Let's cut off their funding. Anti-global. We don't want to have a global economy. And so that's essentially an anti-movement. But the problem is that populist governments are great at breaking things and blowing them up. They're not very good at creating a positive environment, a positive agenda. This is a chart of what Brits think about Brexit. And you'll see that Brexit barely passed, like 52-48. That chart, by 5 years later, the proportion of people who think Brexit's a good idea was down to 30. Opposition 55. Guess what? It's too late. They blew it up. It's gone. And now they're dealing with the after effects of that. And we'll be dealing with the after effects of that for a long time. Okay, Matt. I've been trying to think about what positive the Trump administration achieved in the second term so far. That would be the agenda that would be supported by a majority of Americans. I think shutting down the southern border to illegal immigrants through rhetoric and some policy changes without any physical barriers is quite an accomplishment, frankly. I mean, Trump said, we don't need new policy, we need new president. And simply by virtue of his rhetoric, he's basically shut down the southern border, and we didn't have to spend $30 billion on it. So I think that's something that's broadly supported by the American people. Getting Europe to assume more responsibility and funding for its own defense, I think, is something even people in Europe are reluctantly saying, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Obtaining a ceasefire in Gaza and getting some of the hostages out probably wouldn't have happened without Trump's pressure. Preserving girls and boys' sports for biological females has had the overwhelming support, like 80% support of Americans. The best ad that the Trump administration ran in 2024 was Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for us. And that fed into the views of about 8 out of 10 Americans. And it's a little premature to be saying this, but it looks like an economic soft landing with solid growth and lower inflation may be within sight. I mean, just this last month, jobs ticking up, inflation ticking down, maybe we're going to get an economic soft landing. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty good summary of what I think are the positive things that most Americans would support. The current state of American democracy. Are there any guardrails left? This has been the subject of so much discussion in the political world, and we're getting a stress test. There is no question. We've had presidents who tested their boundaries. Obama's DACA program was instituted without any support from Congress. Biden's student loan forgiveness. But I think almost any reasonable observer would agree that Trump has pushed the limits far beyond any other peacetime president, far beyond. He said, I have Article 2 where I have a right to do whatever I want as president. And I think he believes that. And when you believe that, there are no guardrails. 3 guardrails, I think, appear to be holding. Number one, and we just saw it again this morning, is, well, let's do the next one. We saw it this morning, was federal courts with lifetime judicial appointments None of these people have to run in Republican primaries to keep their careers going. And that is a huge, huge bulwark against intimidation. And we've seen recently grand juries. You know, the old line is a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor asked them to. We've had grand juries who have rejected indictments. Most recently, the grand jury in Washington rejected the indictment of the 6 elected Democratic officials who did an ad telling the military that you don't have to obey illegal orders. They're all veterans. Rumor has it that there wasn't a single grand juror who agreed to that. That's really something. And the grand jury is just normal people, as Chris was talking about, what can normal people do, have pushed back on that. This is a fascinating question from the Pew Research Center. It's about a year ago. If a federal court rules a Trump administration action illegal, the administration has to follow court orders 78%, does not have to follow court's ruling 19%. And then they went back to the 19% and said, what if it's the Supreme Court who rules that a Trump administration action is illegal? The administration does not have to follow the court's ruling down to 9%, has to follow it 10. So 10 plus 78, 88% of Americans say you have got to follow the Supreme Court's ruling. Only 9% say they don't have to. That is a stunning number, which obviously includes the vast majority of Republicans. Okay? The markets have made the Trump threat on tariff back off. You see Liberation Day, April 2nd, 2025, the markets immediately dropped. And then they kept dropping. And then he started backing off and backing off and backing off. I think the same thing happened when the threats to take over Greenland. It's not as dramatic as Liberation Day, but there was a market drop when he was over in Europe talking about taking over Greenland. And I think that's what backed him off. So you've got the markets that I think have a guardrail that has been effective. And one more, public opinion. Public opinion made Trump back off the Minneapolis ICE raids. How would you describe the actions of ICE in enforcing immigration laws? Do you think they have gone too far? 65%. Not gone far enough? 12%. They're about right? 22%. 2/3 of Americans think they've gone too far. Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff, of course, is the architect of this draconian throw them all out policy. The last time I was here, Chris, I suggested that as a dyed-in-the-wool North Carolina Tar Heel, that the problems Stephen Miller had in understanding the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and our founding principles were due to the deficiencies of his Duke education. I've had to be a little more generous. I think not even the deficiencies of a Duke education could lead to the racist anti-immigrant bile that comes out of that guy's mouth on a daily basis. So I need to just apologize to my Duke friends for that smear last year. Okay. Outlook for the 2026 midterms. Key points about midterm elections. Midterm elections are referendum on the president's party. Always have been, always will. Therefore, the key stat to watch is the president's job approval leading into the election. It's right now at about 40. The president's party has lost 7 out of 40 midterm elections since the Civil War. That's 93%. It's lost Senate seats in 19 of the 28 since the direction election senators. It's lost a lower percentage because, as you know, only 1/3 of the Senate's up every year as opposed to the entire House. So what happens with the president's party, a president having a 50% job approval or above? Well, you'll see in 2002 and 1998, the president's party actually gained seats. In 2002, it was the aftermath of 9/11. 1998, it was Republicans overreaching on Bill Clinton's impeachment. Every other president, even those above 50%, lost seats. The average loss of House seats when the president's job approval is above 50 is 14. But let's go to the next slide. When the president's job approval is below 50, the average loss of House seats is 32 and 4 Senate seats. Now, there's obviously a lot of variation around each of these midterms. It depends on the short-term factors. But the relationship between the president's job approval and the president's party's performance in the midterms is very, very strong. Now, we've got some mid-decade redistricting going on, but from what we can see so far, it seems like kind of wash. You know, you may pick up some Republican seats in Texas, but lose them in California. So we'll see, but I think it would be a tremendous upset for the Republicans to hold on to that. Okay, outlook for the 2028 election. At this point in February of 2006, Barack Hussein Obama was considered a joke to be the Democratic nominee, much less the next president of the United States. At this point, in February of 2014, very few people thought Donald Trump would be the Republican nominee. It was considered kind of a joke. And yet, here he is as president. And so what that tells me is you better be real circumspect about making any judgments about the lay of the land now going in this far ahead. The Democratic nomination is completely wide open. They got some governors there, Josh Shapiro, Gavin Newsom, Andy Beshear, Gretchen Whitmer. They got a whole host of governors, and I'm sure there'll be a cast of 1,000 before it's over, and I have no idea where that's going. J.D. Vance is a favorite for the Republican Party, but it helps to remember that very few people have gone into service in the Trump administration and come out with their reputations intact. You know, from Jeff Sessions, Tom Price, first term, to Lindsey Halligan, most recently. You know, Lindsey, the former insurance lawyer with no prosecutorial experience, was installed by Penn Dondi to go get indictments of James Comey and Letitia James. She ended up getting 2 gripping judicial rulings against her. She ended up having to resign and go out and try to hold on to her law license now. So it's a service in the administration isn't always the elevation that we might think it would be. What was Lou said? Because of Trump's unpopularity, will Trump's heir apparent be the odds-on favorite to win the nomination? I'm not so sure. Then the door will be open to another candidate. And I don't know who that other candidate would be. Marco Rubio has gotten a lot of kudos, justifiably in my view, for his Munich speech. I worked for Marco in his 2010 upset of Charlie Crist for Senate, and he did his presidential campaign as well as his Senate campaign that followed. I will tell you that Marco Rubio is a world-class political is. You may not like what he's done in the Trump administration. He is a world-class talent. From what I've seen, J.D. Vance is not. So we'll see. It could very well be somebody we haven't thought of, or somebody who's kind of gone in hiding. But I think the door will be open. So what comes next? The future of American politics has a whole lot of elements to it. I think the Supreme Court is at the center of fights over the rule of law. A constitutional confrontation is not out of the question. Still entirely possible for the president to say, no, I'm not going to follow that. But I think he's running up against 88% opposition of the American people if he does that. On again, off again tariffs and trade wars are creating a very unstable environment for planning for both large and small businesses. And I think that will continue. We don't know if the businesses who have paid the tariffs now are going to be able to get a refund. And all of that's going to be decided in the lower courts. So we're going to have lots and lots of court cases dealing with billions and billions of dollars. John F. Kennedy Jr.'s cut to basic health funding and NIH and skepticism of vaccines who have long-term public implications for public health. This bothers me as much as anything else in administrations. Cutting off funds for the National Institutes of Health is cutting off your nose to spite your face. And the problem is we'll never know the consequence. We'll never know that cure for Alzheimer's that wasn't found, that cure for a certain type of cancer that wasn't found, because the basic research is not being done. Pharma does a lot of research, but it's all on drugs that they think have a particular market value. The basic research, like the research into the mRNA vaccine, was done by NIH. And that's what allowed us to have the effective and remarkably effective COVID vaccine in 10 months, which is almost unheard of. He's cut that off. And that really is trouble. China's stepping in with soft power where the U.S. has pulled back on foreign aid and USAID funding. I've been to Kenya and Tanzania with the one campaign that supported PEPFAR, the George W. Bush initiatives to fight AIDS and malaria, saw what some money could do there. And now that we've cut that off, the Chinese are coming along and saying, see, I told you it was America's. And it's not good because China sees the advantage there in moving into the hole. History suggests Democrats are going to win control of the House in 2026. The Senate seats that are up really favor Republicans maintaining control, but even that in this environment, it's not assured. And finally, it's hard to imagine having any other Republican that energizes the MAGA voters the way Trump has. No one else has his combination of political instincts, ability to command attention, devotion, and entertainment value. He's sui generis. And it's really difficult for me to see someone else stepping into his shoes and being as exciting to his base and generating kind of incredible devotion from his base that he has. So I'd like to leave you with a quote from the late great Charles Krauthammer, how I miss him. In the end, all the beautiful, elegant things in life, the things I care about, the things that matter, depend on getting the politics right. Because in those societies where they get it wrong, everything else is destroyed, everything else is won. So, Chris, that's the state of the world for public opinion.
Who has a question for Whittier?
Yes,
So my question is, and this is perfect given that you work for Marco Rubio. I'm a Don Bacon and I want to, obviously there's going to be the J.D. Vance heir apparent MAGA wing. If I wanted to beat out Marco Rubio and I were Don Bacon, what would be the top couple of issues that you would pick that you would see that a more traditional, what I would say an ORL candidate, what would those issues be?
I don't know that I could pick out one or two, but I think what you do is just say that anyone who's a part of this current administration is going to be tarred with all the deficiencies of the administration. And I would argue that it's time for an outsider who wasn't part of this administration to carry the ball and more likely to be successful.
I think most reasonable people would agree that it's an almost certainty that Democrats take the House and maybe the Senate. How much does the possibility of them blocking or overreaching in that position affect the positioning of various candidates? Just like your viewpoint there.
Isn't that a great question? Democrats are in many ways like Republicans in the sense they get control and then they want to get everything. Then they overreach even when the public is with them. It's like this thing, well, we're gonna get rid of ICE, we gotta defund ICE. That's just dumb. You talk about reforming, stopping some of the characteristics of ICE with their masks and their no names and all of that, but you don't talk about getting rid of ICE because you saw 87% of the people want to get rid of the bad guys, So they have a tendency to overreach. I think if the Democrats take over the House, there will be a very, very strong effort to impeach Donald Trump again, which will go nowhere. And you will waste a lot of time and a lot of political capital trying to impeach Donald Trump again. Now, you're wrong, but there's a tendency within that party to try to do that and overreach, and they will blow what I think would be a golden opportunity to do sort of a reset. Yes, sir.
So perhaps this is a little tainted just because I'm sitting in Arizona, but how does an organization like this, or how do you become a counterpoint to Turning Point?
That is a Chris Vance question. So let me let Chris answer that.
That's a great question. I would love for us to be a counterpoint to Turning Point. We've tried to engage them like maybe doing debates and those sorts of things. But I have to be honest because I'm an honest guy, and it doesn't do any good to not tell people the truth. We're not nearly that big. I mean, as big as Principles First tomorrow is going to draw 2,000 people, 1,500 people, 2,000. Turning Point's beginning 20, 30, 40,000. There's a great hunger out there on that wing of the party. we represent this much smaller sliver of the party that lost in 2016 and has been in the wilderness ever since. It is going to take time to rebuild this thing. We are not nearly that big yet. We consider I mean, again, I would debate anybody can count Turning Point USA tomorrow. And Joe, our media person, has tried to make that happen. Joe, make that happen. But I cannot credibly tell you right now that we are as big as they are. But everybody has to start somewhere. And I believe that, you know, 2028, there's going to be an election. Elections change things. And it's going to be the start of a new era. And that's what we are building towards now.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Kind of following up on those comments, a few of us in this room, you're all very good, agree with it, see lots of substantiating survey research on those issues. But the question that I have are, why do 68% of Republicans still support Trump and feel he's doing a good job? Because we have to understand why they do that before we're ever going to change the Republican Party again.
Donald Trump has convinced that a great many Republicans, particularly the MAGA wing, that the world is stacked against them, that the Epstein class is what's really running the world, that people have not only forgotten about them, but looked down on them. The Hillary Clinton deplorables, the Barack Obama, those people who cling to their guns and religion. They feel a contempt from the elites, particularly of the Democratic Party, but also the Republican Party, and that he is their savior. And it has been amazing to watch Christian evangelicals rally around him. But he has presented himself as the defender of their values, the defender of their lifestyle, the defender of their America. And he has developed with that message an extraordinary level of devotion. I mean, his number one coalition, part of his coalition, are Christian evangelicals. And it's stunning to watch, but that's a big part of it. Now, it helps to remember, not all the people who voted for Trump are MAGA. Depending on how you ask the question, it's only about half. We asked the question a little different way. We asked of all, this shortly after the election, we asked of all the people who voted for Donald Trump, did you vote for Donald Trump because you consider yourself part of the MAGA movement? Or did you vote for him primarily because you considered him just a better choice than Kamala Harris? Ask it that way, it was 35% MAGA, 65% just a better choice. So it helps to remember that not everybody voted for Donald Trump. Is MAGA not even close?
So again, honesty. In my view, I think my leadership would agree. I think Senator Danforth would agree. I think all leaders would agree with this. If the Constitution didn't say what it said, and Donald Trump could run for a third term, I don't think we could beat him. Okay? Because his unique popularity, as Witt said in his presentation, his unique hold on that wing of the party. But the Constitution does say what it says. He will leave the stage, and that changes everything. And also, when you started with something that helps be people in the room, I think there's people still coming in. It's been a little frustrating. Not even people here is like, oh, it could be. But we are as big as I say we are. We've got 25 state chairs, roughly 10,000 people online, a ton of people watching online right now. But we are still small. We are still small because, and I can say this as someone who spent his career in Republican politics as an elected official and a party official, Republicans are loyal to their leaders. And Republicans from the beginning have been, you know, I may not like Donald Trump so much. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's the nominee, he's the president. So we still, at this moment, we represent this thin slice of the party that wants to remain Republican, but doesn't like the current leadership. But everything changes when he leaves the stage. It's a completely new ball.
Turning Point USA. The question I have is, I had the impression that Charlie Kirk was Turning Point USA. With him gone, does the movement stay as strong, or does it maybe drift off in ways that it just doesn't have the same kind of pull as it had before?
Well, Charlie Kirk was obviously the major moving force and the intellectual force behind it. There does seem to be, though, an organization that is, as Chris said, really large and committed. And I can see it continuing as a force. Who knows who's going to step into Charlie's shoes? Maybe it's his wife. But I would be hesitant to dismiss their input at this stage.
Up more, then we've got 3 great speakers.
Would you talk about the educational divide between the two parties and how that has affected the composition of the bases of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party over the past decade?
You put your finger on the major change in American politics. When I first started in this business some decades ago, wealthier people, the better educated people were all Republican, and less well-educated were all Democrats. But Donald Trump has turned that on its head. I love the poorly educated set, and he has developed some real support among particularly non-college educated men, but also non-college educated. College educated women have gone way to the left. They are pretty strongly Democrat. Non-college educated men college educated men somewhat less so. But the educational divide is what's creating challenges for my business in getting the people who are non-college educated, who are part-time voters, to come up and say, basically tell us where they are. That's why some of the polling is underestimating Trump's support. Now, the difference is that those people tend to come out to vote for Donald Trump, but not come out to vote for other Republicans. And I think that's been a huge factor in this election. But you put your finger on one of these most significant changes in politics in the last 20 years.
Okay, one more right here. Sir.
Thank you. You mentioned that seeing Marco Rubio as a world-class political talent. Could you just maybe expound upon that a little bit from your time working with?
Marco is exceedingly bright. He is exceedingly articulate. My friends who speak Spanish tell me he is as articulate in Spanish as he is in English. He's a policy wonk. He really delves into policy, particularly in national security, foreign affairs, intelligence. He truly believes that the world is a better and safer place when America plays a prominent role. And I think he's the moving spirit behind getting Maduro. And he's going to be the moving spirit behind getting a new regime in Cuba. It's funny, a lot of people have talked about how his message in Munich was essentially no different from J.D. Vance's. Well, he was consistent with the idea that Europe needs to play a more prominent role, but the tone was it was a completely different message from J.D. Vance's, I don't care what happens to Ukraine one way or the other. You didn't hear Marco Rubio saying anything like that. And I think he is, among all my clients, that's not true, Lindsey Graham too. In the Trump era, Republican elected officials had 2 choices. You could accommodate yourself to the Trump administration, or you could quit. And most of my clients aren't there. Lindsey and Marco accommodated themselves to the Trump administration, and it's worked out really well for both of them. But I just think in terms of natural political talent, I don't know that I've ever worked with anyone who had more basic political talent and political instincts. Okay, Chris, let me turn back up to you.
Great, thank you again. What was our first national committee meeting? He's outstanding. We will have this presentation on our webpage, but it's already on his. Now, if you want to go and get that. Okay, we have 4 great speakers who want to join us. Matt, I know Governor Roscoe has been waiting online, right?
Yep.
So let's, he's ready to go. Mark Roscoe, for those of you who don't know him, you need to. He's the former Attorney General and then Governor of the state of Montana. He was the chairman of the Bush campaign. And then he was President Bush's second chairman of the Republican National Committee. He came in when there were two young state chairs, I think both newly elected, myself from Washington and Michael Steele from Maryland. The RNC was having some trouble. And Mark Roscoe turned it around and was an outstanding leader for our party. And is now one of our 5 national chairmen. So if he's ready to go, Governor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me begin with where Whit left off and make note of the fact that our fellow Republicans don't need polling information to prove that our democracy presently confronts existential peril. I believe plainly they can see it and they can feel it as I've traveled around the country, that things just aren't right. And nonetheless, however, as Whit has indicated and other polls have revealed, their shared intuition is clearly substantiated by very recent empirical evidence that can our mutual preference. A December 2025 Pew Research poll reveals that just 17% of Americans now trust their government in Washington to do the right thing. And of that 17%, only 15% believe the government will do what's right, quote, most of the time, unquote, leaving an almost indiscernible 2% of our fellow citizens believing that doing the right thing happens, quote, just about always. So the mood and the suspicions about the future of the country obviously are darkened and difficult for a lot of our fellow citizens. These numbers and the shared intuitions that we have, that the American people are confronting, and after almost 250 years after declaring their freedom and their faith in one another, it really is truly a defining moment in the life of our republic. The toil and trouble that we discern today bear an unavoidable resemblance to the political upheaval of the nation in 1860. But it is also of critical importance to remember that what happened in the presidential election of 1860 also reveals to us a pathway to the restoration and the revitalization of our American democracy and our Republican legacy. The premonitions that course through our veins are not dissimilar to those experienced in 1860. The nation was teetering on the cusp of civil war, precipitated by the explosive issues of slavery and states' rights. There were 4 candidates representing 4 different political parties running for president. One of those candidates representing the newly formed Republican Party was, of course, Illinois Congressman Abraham Lincoln, who at that point in time had a losing record in elections that he had been engaged in and had twice previously been defeated in 2 U.S. Senate campaigns in 1854 and 1858. But it was Lincoln's message, and Senator Danforth referred to this, that message of unity, hope, moderation, cooperation, resonating deeply with his fellow citizens that resulted in his election as the 16th President of the United States on November 6, 1860. I can't go all the way through a presentation of some remarks about these issues without referencing my favorite senator in Montana, Senator Mike Mansfield. In 1939, after having served in World War I, and before the United States entered into World War II, Senator Mansfield observed that, quote, democracy as we know it and love it is today facing a challenge to its continuance. This was in 1939, and his words were prophetic as the nation witnessed the destruction of the world order and the viral spread of devastation and death on the European continent. His words ring as true today as they did in 1939. He had watched Europe descend into fascism. First, the dismissal and trifling of an established and almost universal moral code of decency and respect, followed by the definition and classification and isolation of the, quote, enemies of the people, unquote, Those later enslaved, dehumanized, and destroyed based on appearance, color, race, religion, and resistance did not recognize the surreptitious and the incremental disappearance of their common values, their unity, and their liberty until it was too late. The unspeakable tragedies and inhumanity in Minneapolis present clear and convincing evidence that history continually repeats itself. And tragically, it was all there from the beginning. The extremist ideology, the unsparing demands of political party allegiance, the persuasive and pervasive spread of lies and propaganda, the reckless compulsion to disassemble the institutions of existing government, the dismissal of the rule of law, the cruel and childish deprecation of adversaries, the investment of authority and immunity in a brutal secret police force, the cruel treatment of those who appear different from those with weapons, the unrelenting consolidation of power, the forceful herding of human beings like livestock away from the places they called home, the brutal separation of parents from their children, and the arrest and confinement of thousands of people based upon false information and denial of due process. That's a description of what has gone on in Minneapolis. We have held together as a nation for 250 years by a near universal commitment to a set of values, to a moral compass, and to an ethical code comprised of the simple but profoundly essential virtues embedded in the Constitution. The observation and adherence of each of us to those virtues, imperfect though we are, is the only adhesive that holds us together as a nation of free people, people that Donald Trump refers to as losers. Remove our constant and voluntary commitment and observation of those virtues and ethics, and our fragile consensual government vanishes. So today, where are we? When people of good sense and honest purpose look across the landscape of America today, do they see the same warning signs and signals that Mike Mansfield saw in 1939, that George Washington saw in April 1775, that Abraham Lincoln saw in April 1861, and that Martin Luther King saw in August of 1963? And do enough of them love America, their freedom, and their democracy enough to come together to proceed with courage, as their leaders before them did, to preserve, protect, and defend the United States of America? That has always been the question for every generation. And at our Republican Legacy, we believe the answer to that question is yes. So thank you for your engagement, and onward we go.
Thank you, Governor Roscoe. We are thrilled to have you with us. Today, we were going to hear in person from Rena Shaw, one of our senior advisors. Rena is one of America's smartest young center-right leaders. But the young part kind of bit us today because she has a young child who had an accident and broke his nose this morning. And so he's okay, but she can't leave. So she has recorded a brief video instead. Rena Shaw first came to national attention when she was a delegate to the 2016 National Convention, refused to support Donald Trump and was ejected from the hall, and is now an active political commentator and strategist. You see her a lot in the media. And we are lucky to have her as one of our senior advisors. And that looks like it's ready to go. Rena Shaw.
Good afternoon, fellow Republicans, principled conservatives, and friends of our Republican legacy. All of you gathered here today, both in person and online, have our thanks. It's an honor to stand before you as a senior advisor to this vital organization. Together, we're not just attendees at a meeting, we're guardians of a proud tradition, builders of a stronger future, and voices for the Republican Party we know and love, the one that has lifted generations, defended freedom, and inspired the world. Our Republican legacy was founded by giants of our party, Senators John Danforth, William Cohen, and Alan Simpson, statesmen who embodied what it means to serve with integrity, to govern responsibly, and to put country above party faction. They remind us that republicanism at its best is not defined by rage or personality, but by enduring principles, unity over division, fidelity to the Constitution, fiscal responsibility that honors our children's future, and a vibrant market economy that rewards hard work and innovation. Oh, and let's not forget peace through strength that deters our adversaries while keeping America safe. What I just talked about there, those aren't just abstract ideals. Not at all. They are the bedrock that built the most prosperous, free, and generous nation in history, our nation. And they are the principles that can and must guide our party back to greatness. Last fall, Senator Danforth and I had the privilege of co-authoring an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. We titled it Republicans, Ditch MAGA and Return to the Basics. We wrote it because we believe the center can hold, and that it must. America's political center has collapsed under the weight of polarization. But I know, and Senator Danforth knows, and everyone under this banner of our Republican legacy, we all know it can be restored when Republicans return to our roots. The rule of law, limited government that empowers people rather than controls them, and a unifying vision that brings Americans together instead of tearing them apart. Now look, I know the path is not easy. Many of us have watched with very heavy hearts as our party has veered towards angry populism, where grievance drowns out solutions and division becomes the default. But we are here today because we refuse to accept that as our fate. We're here because we believe in redemption, in renewal, and in the power of principled conservatism to win hearts, minds, and elections. Look around the room. Look at the gathering you're part of. We all represent the best of what the Republican Party has always been. Immigrants and native-born, young and experienced men and women from every corner of this great country. My own parents came to America as students, choosing this land of freedom and opportunity as their forever home. I feel so lucky and blessed that they did, and maybe that's why I feel so passionate about being with you under this banner. Because my parents' choice, that leap of faith they took, that's the American story. And it's one that I know I have to carry forward. One for my children, one for your children, one for our communities. And it's also why I fight every day to keep our party worthy of it. A party that welcomes those who believe in our principles, that builds coalitions, that governs with seriousness and compassion. Today, as we hear from great conservative voices and chart our plans for the battles ahead, 2026, 2028, and beyond, let's recommit to this vision. Let us be the Republicans who defend the Constitution, not just in words, but in deeds. Let us be people who balance budgets because stewardship matters, who champion free markets because they unleash human potential, and who pursue peace through strength because weakness invites aggression. And also, let us stand for unity because a house divided cannot stand. We're not in exile, we're in renewal. Our Republican legacy is not a footnote. It is the future. It is the party that can speak to the exhausted majority of Americans who want solutions, not slogans, leadership, not drama, hope, not hate. So let us leave here today inspired, energized, and resolute. Let us carry this message into our communities, our states, and our nation. The Republican Party can be better. That's the message. It will be better because of us. Thank you for your dedication, your courage, and your faith in what we can achieve together. God bless you, God bless our principles, and God bless the United States of America.
Great. Our next speaker is Charlie Sykes, who's also great. Charlie was a leading conservative talk radio host in the Milwaukee area for a very, very long time. Then moved on, still into different platforms, podcasts, Bulwark, other writing and speaking, but always consistently remaining true to his principles, a basic, solid core conservatism. He's one of the smartest members of our center-right community out there. We are thrilled you agreed to spend some time with us this afternoon. Charlie, come on up.
No, I have to try to live up to all of that. Brother Michael, you're gonna have to help me with this a little bit later, because basically, I wanted to start off with the question, how the hell did we all get? How did we get to this particular moment in history? And I prepared a pretty, I think, interesting critique, but I want to make a public service announcement first. For any of you that are feeling kind of weird right now, you're not actually having a stroke. That feeling you're feeling is a little bit of optimism, because we got to win. I mean, it's been a really long time. I had to, ask myself when I got off the plane today and saw these headlines, am I having a stroke? Am I dying? Or is something good just happened? And let's talk about what happened with the U.S. Supreme Court basically stuffed Donald Trump back into the constitutional box. And I really emphasize what a profoundly conservative victory this was for the rule of law, for the principles of the Constitution, and for free markets. And this decision, this 6-3 decision, was something that we see almost never these days, which is a cross-ideological, I don't want to use the word bipartisan because we're talking about judges, a cross-ideological consensus about the way the separation of powers should work, the limitations on presidential women in fiat. And what you're seeing is, I just this afternoon, watching the number of conservatives who are looking at this and going, oh yeah, this is what constitutional conservatism used to look like. This is what we talked about. For people, and there'll be many people across the street tomorrow who will say that, any sort of conservative jurisprudence must be the direct line to MAGA. Well, at least 3 conservative justices on the Supreme Court said, no, there is a distinction. This is the conservative constitutional legacy in action. And so I think it's an extraordinary moment. Now, having said that, I imagine the objections. Will the tariffs go away? No, probably impose them anyway. Is it distressing that 3 conservative members of the Supreme Court actually decided they were going to ignore the black letter of the Constitution, which very explicitly says that only Congress should be able to pass tariffs, with the fact that AIPA does not, the emergency power that Trump claimed, does not even mention tariffs, and yet 3 justices can go along with that. But I'm going to take the win on this, because I think this was a very clear case to make conservative principles say, okay, this is why the founding fathers created the divisions that they did. If you read some of the opinions from the conservative justices, they lay out the role of Congress, the significance of the separation of powers, and why it's so important to involve Congress in issues of spending and taxation. I wish that the potted plant members of Congress understood that as well. So I wanted to start off with that because we have so of these victories. And for people who think that all conservative ideas have been discredited in the last few years, they've gone through some tough times. This is one of those moments to sort of remind people that this is the kind of thing that we were talking about. Also, a lot of talk here about the legacy of the Republican Party. And one of my most frustrating experiences has been, and Mike, you might, I think we agree, but we might have a slight difference with it. The people who say, you know what, this is all a straight line from what you guys have been doing forever. This is, if you supported Ronald Reagan, you basically created mom. And so for the last 10 years, I've carried around this little bit of scripture. Any ministers in the room? Okay, you know why we preach to the choir, so the choir will sing, but also that every once in a while you need to go back to some of the basic documents, and remind yourself what they were. I have frequently been on stage with MAGA supporters and said, I want to read to you from Ronald Reagan's farewell address to the nation, where he described what he meant by America being a shining city on the hill. And he said, I don't know if I've ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it, but in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God blessed, and teeming with people
of all kinds, living in harmony and peace, a city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still. Imagine Donald Trump saying those words today. Imagine any Republican in national life saying these words today. I really enjoyed your commentary, Whit. However, just want to point out the slight differences between the Republican legacy and Marco Rubio in you. You know, Marco Rubio did strike a very different tone when he talked about Russia and Ukraine because he barely talked about it at all. He basically brushed it off. But he also made the point that men and women did not fight for abstractions. They fought for countries. Well, Ronald Reagan talked about that when he went to commemorate the 40th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy. And one of his great speeches, where he talks about what the soldiers did when they climbed the cliffs. What were they doing? Why did they keep doing it? Why did they do it when they were watching their comrades fall? And he said, because they had the deep knowledge that there's a profound moral difference between the use of force for liberation and the use of force for conquest. You were here, he said to these veterans. You were here to liberate, not to conquer. And so you and those others did not doubt your cause. You were right not to doubt. You all knew that some things were worth dying. And he started talking about some abstractions and some tangible. One's country is worth dying for, and democracy is worth dying, because it is the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man. All of you loved liberty. All of you were willing to fight tyranny, and you knew the people of your countries were weak. So I always carry those around because I want to basically say, this is not who Republicans always were. This is not what we signed up for. What we have now is in many ways an abandonment. Not even an abandonment of conservatism, but a bizarro turning everything on its head, rejecting whether you're talking about free markets, or whether you're talking about the rule of law, or fundamental things like decency and prudence that we used to kind of, I don't know, got bored with. But I also want to make another point. And I think this is kind of crucial for us, because we want to talk about the legacy. The fact is, we're not going back to the way things. I mean, folks, we're the possibility that a Mitt Romney or a George W. Bush will speak at a Republican National Convention ever again, slim and none. Mike, where do you go? Slim or none? Yeah, I'm none. I mean, there's no way that the Republican Party that exists, and I think will probably exist for much of the rest of my lifetime, is ever going to be welcoming back a Liz Cheney or an Adam Kinzinger. I'm not even sure about Mike Pence at this particular point. So I think that there needs to be kind of a reality check that we are not going to restore the past. And I've been hearing a lot of backward-looking talk, lots of people from the old times. In fact, I really feel that I fit in here. I feel very welcome here because I'm 71. Okay, so let's be honest here. Are we talking about the future, or are we talking about a nostalgic past that was kind of cool, had its high points, its low points, had its mistakes, but it's not coming back? Paul Ryan is never going to be the future of the Republican Party again. Okay, and I say that as a very, very good friend. But okay, I'm not going to leave you there on that. So a lot of the talk of people saying that conservatism has run its course and has been discredited. I think I'm going to take the opposite point of view on that as well, because look, just because some of the conservative legacy has been discredited on a variety of things, I actually think that many of the conservative ideas that were championed by the Republican Party are actually more relevant than ever and are going to get a second look from a lot of folks that never would have thought about them. Things like, again, how do concepts like smaller limited government sound to a lot of Americans right now? Not focusing all of the power in Washington, D.C., not having an imperial presidency. I think that we have people who are going to be more open-minded about the concept of free trade as opposed to the imposition of billions of dollars in sales taxes on middle-class Americans. I think that talking about the Constitution and the whole concept of checks and balances, these things I think become kind of fresh every single freaking day that we live through the Trump era. That, I found myself the other day, talking with somebody, and they said, I never got excited about concepts like due process before. And yet, once again, all of these values are being challenged. So again, what do conservatives have to offer? Well, maybe there will be a receptive audience for fiscal prudence, for personal responsibility, a return to the belief that character matters, things like truth and integrity, the Constitution, why it's so important, federalism that recognizes state sovereignty. By the way, how do you think that some of our more progressive friends across the street feel about the 9th and 10th Amendments? Or would we like to have all power concentrated in Washington, D.C.? I think that the message of free men and women and free markets, rather than markets controlled by oligarchs and by central planners and by politicians, I think those are new, fresh ideas again. Maybe they've gotten old and dusty, but I think that somebody boldly coming out and saying, okay, we need a party. We need two sane parties. I think we have, maybe 3/4. But these things, I think, are the route to the future. I think we need to talk more about the future than about the past here. I think that I think this is where groups like this can be powerful, to constantly remind people, say, look, we haven't changed our values. These values have been rejected. So do not confuse what Donald Trump is doing with conservatism or with this alternative vision that we are expressing. And we can tell them, in a way, look, we don't all have to put on the motley and all become progressive woke liberals. We don't have to do all those things. And I say this to somebody that until the end of the year was MSNBC and everything, and they're wonderful people and everything. But at a certain point, there is sort of the role of the conservative who's now going to say lots of liberal progressive things. And I think that what we need to do is talk to the voters, that segment of the voters that Wick was talking about, that might vote for Donald Trump, but are not necessarily modern. And to say, okay, you know what? We speak your language. We understand your concerns. We share your some of the other values. And we can tell, look, this is not what we used to be. This is not what we want to be. This is not what you signed up for. And this is not America. We can present that alternative vision, and we can do that because we can say, you know what, listen to us, because we were there before this all went crazy. So again, what can we do? I looked at the list of the founders, incredibly impressive. This is the Republican legacy. I wish I heard more from those people. Where have they been? Why are they not more outspoken? We live in a world of people who are extreme, who are loud, who are opportunistic. We also live in a world where a lot of people go, screw it, why bother? There have been too many people who have been silent for so long and have been gutless. And frankly, this is one of the roles, is like, we all know Republican conservative icons who could have spoken up early. And yet it's never too late, because time moves forward. Pressure to stand up. Also, I do think there's going to be a couple of tests in the midterms and in 2020 where there will be pressure on the election. And once again, there will be crucial Republicans around the country who will stand as the bulwarks against the election lies or the election interference. In Georgia, think about how history would be different if Mike Pence had not done what he did. Think how history would be different if Brad Raffensperger in Georgia had not held the line, or Stephen Richer down in Arizona. So one of the missions, I think, has to be make sure that they know that they have our support, that we have their backs, and that there will not be political orphans if they do the right thing. This is crucial. And I think that test is going to come this year. It will definitely come in 2028. So I hope you succeed in retaking some of the instruments of the Republican Party back. But the hard reality is we're all going to have to make compromises. If in fact Donald Trump represents an existential threat, then that means we're going to have to do things, think new ways, make new friends, not have purity tests. Some of us, frankly, are going to have to vote for Democrats for a while, or look for Democrats who share our values. We cannot have purity tests. But again, every time you have this discussion, and the questions about TPUSA were very, very interesting. Because TPUSA is weaponized MAGA. But they're looking to the future now. Are we looking to the future? And so who are the leaders? And I hope that as you continue your discussions, we can talk about how great, this president or that president was. Who's going to be the next great Republican president who shares those values, who's willing to say to the Republican Party, you were not always like this. You can be different. And this is how we're going to take you into the future. Thank you.
That's perfect. Exactly. Charlie, thank you. You never go backwards. We're never going to go back to what we were. It doesn't work that way. Issues change, people change, circumstances change, but principles endure. Our principles can still be the guiding future for the future of this party. Our final speaker, my good friend Michael Steele. As I said, we were both state party chairman. He went on then to become, good idea, Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, and then the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and one of the 34 founding members of our Republican legacy, one of the truly outstanding voices in our community. Chairman, come on up.
Hey folks, what's up? How y'all doing? I like that. Good energy, good energy. It's a pleasure to be here, to be with all of you, to see you, those here in the flesh, those in the ethernets of Zoom. Thank you for your faith and your participation in this day and this weekend. My buddy Charlie, dude, you nailed it. I don't have much more to say after that. But I appreciate it because you were right on point. Before I get into my remarks, I do want to give a shout out to Senator Danforth for his leadership. Those who've been involved in sort of bringing this idea of legacy republicanism to light in a fresh way, in a refocused way. Certainly to Chris and your leadership, my friend, in sort of taking the effort, which really was just a concept, and bringing it into the flesh, right? Those in this room, those supporting us outside of this room, and their efforts. And Greg Wilson, who is sort of a mensch in many ways. Greg has an incredible gift of crystallizing and distilling the essence of the effort and sort of helping focus and frame that. And my buddy Mark Roscoe, who I had the privilege of serving under as state chairman in Maryland and witnessing firsthand what a good Republican leader is and what they do and how they do it. And so I appreciate those gentlemen for their efforts in sort of steering this ship. Folks, you got a lot today in many respects, in words and in visuals with my man. Love it. Again, someone that I've worked with and known for a long time and has in many respects over many cycles, and in many ways put his finger on the pulse of what's beating out there. From not just a conservative or Republican perspective, but really sort of distilling what the country is thinking, what the country is feeling, because the country at the end of the day, and really a breakdown on red and blue lines as much as we politics like to think they do. They cross those lines fairly freely and fairly frequently. So it's important to have a really good sense of what that is and how that affects what we get to accomplish. So thanks for your presentation. Marco Rubio, I enjoyed that little segment on Marco Rubio, by the way. I remember Marco Rubio, Speaker of the Florida House, when I became chairman of GOPAC. And Marco had finished up his term. And so he called me up because I was working with Marco in Florida at the time on some of the GOPAC stuff through his leadership there. And of course, he was like, what do I do next? What do I do next? I'm like, dude, you're going to run for governor of Florida. And then some folks from Washington got in his head and told him to run for the U.S. Senate. Still think he should have done that governor, think he'd be president. But that's just me. You know, leaders like Marco and others, and you know, I have my concerns about some of the Republicans who decided to, I'll put it politely, work with Trump. I can't get in their heads and their decisions, but what I think it requires of all of us is to decide how we move forward and how we, as very much as Charlie noted, not look backwards, but look forward. I remember as a young man, new to Republican politics, this year is my 50th year as a Republican. My first election was 76, and I watched Ronald Reagan speak to the country in a loss. Dignity, style, and vision. And 4 years later, become president. And over the course of his 8 years in office, put in front of us a sort of firmer view and appreciation of conservative ideas, yes, in principle, but tied that to policy in a way that spoke to the humanity in all of us, in a real way. And it was crystallized for me, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Charlie, the city on a hill. That city on a hill is us, it's the country, right? Have you ever thought about the light in that city? Have you ever thought why that city is a beacon? Have you ever given any consideration to what that looks like to the rest of the world? And why they would come to that light? Why they would follow that light like the Magi did 2,000 years ago, right? Seeking an idea, seeking a promise, seeking something that they felt connected to, even by great distance. Have you ever thought about the light within that city on a hill? Because if you had, you'd realize pretty quickly, we are the light. People are the light. Each one of us bring a light to this great nation that illuminates the world. Because we come from the world. And we can debate how some of us got here, and we can debate all of that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that we're here now. And this goes to the heart of what Charlie was trying to get us to focus on. The light doesn't allow you to look backwards. It illuminates too much, all at the same time, right? You can't waste your time doing this when the light is focusing your attention over here. and over there. But more importantly, when that light is illuminating each one of us to each other, that's what makes this consequence work. That's what makes this moment work. That's what makes this country work. Because it doesn't without us. So what we see now in this environment, in this time, is a leadership that wants to turn the light on. Not dim it, not put it under a bushel basket. You turn it off. You gonna let me turn off your light? You gonna let Charlie turn off your light? You gonna let your husband turn off your light? You gonna let your children off your light? Your neighbor turn off your light? Now why the hell would you let Donald Trump turn off your light? That's why you're here. You want to keep the lights on. You want the country and the world to see the value, the idea of America as it was conceptualized and how you, me, and each one of us actualize it every day. So it's not just, oh, I want to be a part of a group of people who think like me. Or I'm frustrated because I don't like this, that, or other thing about the administration, and I want to go involved and get engaged in some policy. Or, you know, I got nothing to do this weekend, I just want to go to the National Harbor. I think you're here, and those of you who are listening, and those of you who are seeking something, I think you're doing that because you recognize the power of your light. You recognize the value of what you bring right now in this moment. ORL is a framework. To our state chairman, thank you so much because you're elevating the torch, that light. You're putting it a little above your head and saying, hey, this way, over here in this corner, we're going to gather 2, 3 at a time, whatever. Bring your light. We're going to make it work. Because the more of this land we can light up, the stronger we become. And the more we take that light and we shine it towards the future, the better we become. That's it. It's not complicated. But a lot of people want us to believe it is. That it's going to take work that you can't do. Work you don't have time to do. Work you won't want to do. You're here because you're already doing the work. You're here because you're already engaged in the moment. You're here because you brought your light with you and you're ready and willing to share it and shine it on others. So when you leave here, take that light back with you as you do the work, as you encourage others. Very much as Charlie said, I don't care where you are on the spectrum. You know, I don't care if you're, you know, a progressive, you're conservative, I don't know, I'm a this. Look, you're an American. We got to all pull together right now because the test, you're in it. You're taking it. And we can't fail. Because if we do fail, the light goes out. Not by Donald Trump's hand, but by your own. And that won't be old, right? Because there's nothing left. There's nothing to believe in. there's nothing to hope for. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to pass on as legacy to your children's children. Because that's what the light requires. You keep it strong, you keep it bright, so that others may follow it, be led by it, but that at some point, light the path for others. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you for doing what you're doing in states around the country. Go back, energize. It's going to be a hell of an exciting political cycle, we know that. But however you engage with light and show people the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to close with a new video, hopefully. I'm gun shy today of all the challenges. A bunch of our state chairs, this is a 2-minute video, brief statements from our state chairs. Most of whom in this video could not make it today, so you'll get to meet some of the state chairs across the country who couldn't be here today.
Hi, this is Steve Willing from the great state of California. Our Republican legacy gives us a chance to really get out there and reshape the Republican Party and get back to the core principles that really built the party that has done so much for this country. And it really gives you a chance to get out there and do something and take part in the process.
Hello, my name is Julian Boykin. I'm involved with Our Republican Legacy because I believe Republicans should lead with the Constitution, free enterprise, fiscal responsibility, unity, and peace through strength.
I'm a member of Our Republican Legacy because I'm deeply concerned for the future of our country and believe that fiscal responsibility, free enterprise, unity, peace through strength, and adherence to the Constitution can make the lives of all Americans better.
I'm involved with Our Republican Legacy because America needs the Republican Party to return to the common sense conservative values of Ronald Reagan and so many other great Republican leaders.
I'm Michael Broadcorb, and I'm involved with Our Republican Legacy because the Republican Party must be a big tent for all who believe in what the Republican Party has been and must be in the future. As always, we will have our differences on a range of specific issues. We will share our common commitment to the fundamental principles that define us.
I'm involved because I believe America's best days are still ahead of her, and that it will take a Republican Party that is both future focused and based on our core values and principles to make America great again.
I'm involved with Our Republican Legacy because I believe in its mission, I believe in its founding principles, and I believe in the policy objectives it's developing to address the critical issues facing our nation today.
I'm Tiffany Longino, and I'm from the great state of Mississippi. I joined ORL because we value less government, we value less red tape, but more importantly, more support for our military. We know that the government is not the solution to our problems.
So take a look again here. If you like what you've heard today, you agree with us, take a look again at those action steps. Join ORL online. Share our message. You can become a donor. Sign up to be a state chair. We need more state chairs. We need more assistant state chairs and vice state chairs. And finally, join your local party organization. Run for precinct delegate, because that's how you can influence the process. American politics is defined by who wins elections, ultimately. And we believe that if you're going to take the Republican Party back, you've got to fight within the Republican Party. I believe America will never be safe as long as MAGA controls one of our two great parties. So no matter how difficult this fight is, we must fight. Finally, just a couple of quick closing notes. ORL state chairs and staff we will reconvene in this room at 7:30 tonight for dinner. You're welcome to join us. A lot of us will be over at the Principals First happy hour, which is at a restaurant, I think it's right around the corner. And then we will have a table during the entire exhibition, the entire summit in the exhibition hall across the street at National Harbor for ORL. So come and join us. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thank you for enduring with us the tech difficulties we had today. And again, thank you very much.